So this video is about scribbling. Actually, it's not just about scribbling, but it does involve some scribbling and playing. But it's really centered around giving some practical advice about how to develop your drawing ability and exercises you can do that will help with that. So really, when you think about it, what is a drawing? A drawing is you placing your thought onto paper. Other people can see it, and you want them to get the idea that you had in your mind over to their mind. So it's a method of communication. And of course, there's steps in that. So one of them is the idea, which is in your mind. And then there's the execution, which is putting it physically on paper. So that's a physical act. And just like with athletes who practice various drills and routines, you can do the same as an artist. And this is very basic. It's fairly common knowledge, but it's always good to remember how important it is. Because what are you after? You're after control, right? You want to be able to control yourself so you can put down what you envisage in your head. And it's a two-way street, in fact, because the more you have control over your drawing, arm, hand ability, the actual physical technique, the more that is going to influence your ideas that come into your head and back and forth. The idea being that if you're very clumsy in your execution, of course, that's not going to come across to the person who's looking at your drawing. You know, that you're going to be communicating something different than if you have control. And again, it's to be as controlled and intentional as possible. And that's not the same thing as being stuffy and too fixed, and very like overly exact. It's just that if you want to be loose, you're loose. If you want to be controlled, you're controlled. That the whole thing's not random, right? Because there's supposed to be some intentionality behind it. So these are for later. I'm going to can I get into some specifics? So there are drawing exercises you can do. I'll get into that in a second with some of these scribbly kind of things. But the first thing I'm going to show again, which I touched on in another video, and it's again sort of fairly common knowledge, is if you break it down, you've got your drawing with your hand. I mean, in most cases. So it really gets into how you hold the instrument and how you use your arm. And so there's three basic breakdowns of that. There's drawing from your elbow, and you probably have your elbow, you can hear it thumping on the ground, and you're using your hand like a compass, and you're fixing your wrist and your fingers, which are the other two components. So you're using your arm like a compass. I'm going to use a marker because it's clearer to see. And you're basically, whatever orientation your hand is in and wrist, you're fixing it. So say I'm like this, I've got my marker, and I can I'm slightly moving my elbow and drifting it. It's like a compass, right? So you're going to get a big arc if you're going from your elbow. So that would be for big, long, curved lines. I'm actually adding a little bit from the other components, so I'm cheating a little bit. But the idea is basically that in this case, you're fixing from the elbow and just swinging. The next would be is if you fix from your wrist here and you have it anchored and you're not moving your fingers, but you're just swinging from your wrist, maybe for smaller lines. And the next would be from your fingers is you, I'm going to zoom in here. Fingers, you are doing something with your fingers when you're drawing. It's like smaller motions. However you do hold your instrument, your pencil or pen or whatever, you are moving your fingers around. That might be like doing, textures. Say you're doing a pattern of whatever kind. You're using your fingers, right? I mean, you could do it from I'm doing it from my elbow for bigger ones, but there are things that are better suited, like smaller little details that are better suited for your fingers or wrist than for your elbow, and vice versa. So that's kind of a basic breakdown of 3 things you can do and with your arm, wrist, and fingers to think about which ones you use. Do you use them intentionally? And once you understand this and do it and practice it and build it into what you're doing, it becomes natural. And you get more control just from that very basic understanding of that alone. Like an example that has often come to mind is when you see somebody really skilled at something, they've done things like this prior in their training. Like, have you ever seen those like cooking videos? You see a really skilled chef chopping or something, and they can do it really precisely and quickly. Or even I've seen videos in the Far East, for example, of street vendors who are the same. They're incredibly skilled. They have great physical control. And it's like this in any kind of manual labor when you practice it enough. And I guess drawing is a kind of manual labor. Another thing I'm going to show, which is on basic physical control before we get to exercises, is something really, really key I find for drawing or for inking in particular. And it's what I call the bracing finger. It says that you rest the weight of your hand as you're drawing on something else. Now, often what people do is they don't do that. Like, and you know, you're free if you've got obviously something that works for you, great. I'm trying to give tips for people who might be looking for a different way. And I'm certainly obviously relating what works for me. And what made a big difference for me is understanding that if I just had my weight on my wrist and then went straight to the tip of the pencil, it can be very unstable, which of course you can use if you like to on purpose to get a wobbly line, or sometimes you can go up further on the pencil or inking thing and it'll wobble on purpose. And you know, you might do that with a bigger marker. I'm gonna get one of my bigger markers here, and this is like a chunky cut marker. You know, you can, I'm twisting it as I'm inking to get like a very unusual line. You could do that with rock textures, and I'm holding it further up on purpose. I'm digressing a bit, but here, what I was going to say is, if you put your weight as you're inking on one of your other fingers, like I use this finger here, or this group of fingers, and what I'm doing is I'm sliding on that, and then really what I'm using is the rest of my hand to control the pressure on the tip of the pen or brush. I would do the same thing if I'm brush inking. I often hold it a little bit more vertical. And so what you're doing is you don't have the accidental effect of the weight suddenly and erratically falling on the tip of the marker or pencil or whatever. Pencil doesn't matter as much, I guess, if you're going to be inking it afterwards. So that's a really key thing, is to use that bracing finger. It gives you so much more control and accuracy because you've put the basic weight of the whole thing on these fingers, and then you fine tune it by kind of going like that with the marker or brush or whatever you're using. Okay, so try that out, and I think if you experiment with it, you'll soon see what I'm getting at. Now what I'm going to talk about is exercises. So there's times when maybe you want to warm up, typically, or you might even be in a funk and you're not sure what to draw, and you want to get into drawing. You feel like drawing, but you don't know what to draw. Oh my gosh. So what's a great thing to do, just like in high school, I remember doing this endlessly, listening to some teacher or something, and doodling inside my book. And you just start doing what are essentially drawing exercises or practice. And there's endless ones you can come up with. And I'll try and demonstrate some of them. But they're all to an end of gaining mastery and control over what you're doing. And I guess I'm not a musician, although I'm fascinated with music. But I guess if you're a pianist, you'd be playing scales and practicing chords and things. And it would be the same on guitar. You'd be practicing different riffs and what do you call them, licks, and chords and all that. But you're not actually focused on playing a song. So like I was doing earlier, you can practice things like here. I'm just doing straight lines from the elbow, trying to make them parallel. You can do different spacings or wider. and I'm trying to make them even. I might make them even along a path going back and forth. And I'm going to zoom in a bit again here. You can really make up anything endlessly, which is what I'm going to rattle on about here. You're really just playing. But the idea is that you're gaining control by doing this, but you're not worrying about doing an exact drawing. So you might work on speed. So go very slowly and deliberately. Here I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to taper off. Just do dots in a very regular way. I'm doing little angled dots, and say I want to make them like a grid. So this is getting into making patterns. So then I think, okay, I like that, but what about if I do it like this? Shorten them as I go. Can I try and control them? You know, and this all comes in handy if, excuse me, if you're doing rendering, inking, cross-hatching. It starts making a pattern. You try to see how regular you can make it. There are other ones too, like say we get into more organic curved lines, you could work on this kind of thing. I'm trying to keep myself relaxed here and do it. What I'm trying to do is make it as regular as possible. This one's a tough one actually, or a variation on that is doing spirals. I'm using that bracing finger again. It's crucial for something like this, which is put the weight on that so I can just swoop with my arm, really from my elbow actually, not even my wrist. But I'm controlling the pressure. And I'm using my fingers to tighten a little bit that spiral down. I'm trying to replicate it so I can do it exactly each time. You ever see on Instagram, if you search calligraphy, this kind of okay, but could be better. I haven't done this in a while. Oh, I apologize. But yeah, I was going to say on Instagram, if you go on Instagram and look at under calligraphy, there's some people that do amazing calligraphy, hand lettering with different angle cut, like on this angle cut nibs of various kinds. This is a marker from Pigma, but they use dip pens often. And people who do that old style show card lettering, like it's called show card, S-H-O. I think they used to spell it that way. Show card lettering, you know, like the old signs you'd see in the shops where they're hand lettered with a big brush. Or there's also people on Instagram, I'm digressing here, but what the hell. There's people on Instagram who do videos of painting glass, lettering on glass shop windows, which are just incredible. The control, they use gold leaf and things like that. Anyway, back to drawing. What we're doing here is kind of a version of that. Is you want to gain control. Let me think of other examples. I'll get one piece of paper here. Trying to stay in screen for everybody. Say I'm doing bigger patterns. Again, I'm using my bracing finger and I'm purposely tapering it down. I'm trying to control it. You know, and then say I want to do the same thing. Kind of match the tempo. I'm trying to do it as regularly as I can. Like, can I control it so it's even? The width is even here, and the shapes, and they're almost, not exactly. And you could make it like this. And again, I'm using that bracing finger. I'm putting the weight on this finger here. You might not be visible in the video, but that's what I'm doing. Because if I do it like this, I guess I can do it, but the weight's on my wrist, and I don't like it. It doesn't give me precise fine line control. Any of these you can find complete variations on. Like, say I'm doing that, I'm going to turn it into a spiral. Maybe an angled spiral like this. And what next? How about get into drawing ellipses? I'm trying to do it from my wrist the way animators do it. You know, you're drawing like very loose construction drawings. Because if you try and draw it itself slowly, you can do it, but try and draw it slowly, it's going to wobble more. And I was going to show this too. Those aren't really that good actually, but kind of okay. Let's keep going. The more you do, the better you get. Narrow ellipses into a straight line, you know, or the reverse. Not very good, wonky. You're trying to make it so that it's even, like even this way and this way. If you quartered it and flipped the parts over. And that's why I have these ellipse templates. These are old school, as you would call it, drafting templates. Where am I here? Nope, this way. Isometric. And this is from Standard Graph, number, you know, or Barrel Rapid Design. And I'm assuming you can still buy these. There's endless ones of them. I haven't really checked, but there used to be tons and tons of these that you could buy. And I've still got stacks of them from the days when I was doing airbrush. I'd use these to cut friskets with. But here, what I thought of doing was, even just for an exercise, you know, those are pencil drawings of these ellipses. And practice inking them. What's cool about these is that they have, well, I did this, is if it shows up these bumps here, you could even buy a punch thing that added bumps to these templates. The reason being, as you can see, there's ink on this one. I used to use these for inking my drawings, and I still would actually, still might. But what helped was to have them raised up off the surface. And that way when you inked, like if it was the ones where I hadn't added these bumps using this puncher, like over here, if it's touching, sometimes your ink would suck under the edge and you get a big smear, and then you'd be into retouching and whiting out. It's all the pre-digital stuff. But anyway, here, you know, think of like another exercise would simply be to ink something really slowly and carefully. How did I do? Okay. Why do this? Well, it's a rainy afternoon and you feel like it because you like drawing, but it's also going to develop technical skill and exactitude. What's the right word? Precision. I'm wobbling. See, actually, I'm doing this the wrong way. I should go. Usually you should go from the inside of the natural arc of your hand. So when I get to this side, like over here, I should turn it. So I should really do it this way. And normally I do this, but I guess I'm thinking about making YouTube videos and I'm getting a little fixed on keeping the drawing under the camera. But anyway, you see the idea is you stay on the inside. And what does it do? After a while, it builds up a sense of the exact shape that it should be. There, I bunged it up. Different ellipses. See, that one's better. It's pretty tough, right? There, that was good. Try and draw an exact ellipse as freehand and get it to join up. And again, you just do this over and over. Those are not that regular. They're the hardest ones to do. Really do nice ones. That's how I ended up with these scribble sheets from the beginning. So probably the last thing I'll do is hatching. So again, hatching would be like this. And then cross-hatching would be whenever you go across it. And having control and regularity is important for this, of course, because if your lines are always different, you're not going to get an even tone, which you might want in some cases, but you want to do that intentionally, not just because you can't control it. So that's cross-hatching. I mean, you can keep going across even more. My pen's starting to dry out here. And here I'm trying to go across it with the same spacing on all the different angles. And you get a tone. Of course, what you could do is do the cross-hatching at different spacings. That's a little off, but see here I've done it tighter. I'm almost getting more into pen inking ideas here. There's a book I have somewhere, I think it's by Ernest Watson, about pen inking, that's really great, and it gets into all this. Actually, let's think of, this gets more into textures too. I'm using my fingers here. It almost gets you into things like this if you start adding different patterns. You can create textures of different materials or surfaces. And then another cool thing is when you change the angle of the hatching, like these are very close to each other, you get different effects. See, it almost makes like a moire pattern where you get this lines, see the illusion of lines where they cross because the angle is very close. And what happens is if you make curved ones, like say I go like this, and then here I'll go across it this way doing the same thing. You can get a gradation effect, or you can get different, when the angles of the lines cross at different sort of speeds, you can get different visual effects from doing that. And if you experiment with this, you'll soon see what I'm talking about. And you can get into dotting. That might be slower to draw, but you can add in dotting like over things. Or add like a combination of curved and straight. So like, say I do that, and then I'm adding just straight lines over it. That has a certain effect too. So I think I'm going to end it there. That's a whole bunch of different but interrelated ideas about just working on coming up with your own exercises and things you can practice that interest you. And where do they all go back to? They all go back to the idea I said at the beginning, which is if you want to be able to execute the idea that you have in your head really exactly, you need control. And you need to be able to continue the idea from your mind through your arm, wrist, and fingers onto the paper. So if you're stuck for something to do, maybe try some of these kinds of things and just go back to practicing them. I always find that even doing this gets me back to the actual fun of the physical act of drawing, which as I always like, it's like when you're a kid, you just like, you know, you say you've got some crayons or markers, you like the smell, the color, the texture, even the sound. It's that ASMR thing, you know, the actual sound and sort of the whole physical experience of drawing is pleasurable just by itself. It, you know, which is something that maybe is a bit less in some ways on digital media, like using a Wacom or, you know, any similar media like that. It's a little bit more distant from actually contacting the paper and interacting with the paper. So I'm losing my voice. There you go. Thank you for listening, and there'll be more videos soon. And if you like my channel and content, please, standard request is please like the video because it does help, and share, subscribe if you'd like, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.